Okay. So let's go to Going Down the Road, 1970, Don Shebib. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it.
I
I
think it's
think
Don
so.
Shebib, actually.
Shebib.
I think.
And so the song is, I think it's called Going Down the Road, and it's Bruce
Yeah.
Cockburn. Very early. I mean, Bruce Cockburn might have been making music before then, but that certainly precedes his his fame even in Canada as a
Oh,
as an
very much
artist. I
so.
think. I mean,
Yeah.
he started having hits. I'd say when more like in the mid, like when was Wondering When the Lions Are, like 74, 75 or something,
I'm
like probably
thinking that. See,
74.
I think that's a little later, more like 76, 77.
And is that his first? Was that his first big hit? I should have looked it up, but that's what I
I
kind of
think it was
remember as being
probably his first radio hit. Although
radio
I
hit.
bought,
That's what I mean. But yeah.
yeah, I bought the one with the Alex Colville cover, Sunwheel,
Right. Yeah.
before that, because FM used to play a song called Mama Just Wants to Barrel House all night long, I think,
Okay. Okay.
which got me onto that. It's got a great cover with the horse and the
Yeah.
railway tracks. But I think Going Down the Road, I don't know if it precedes his first album or comes along at exactly the same time. And I have his first album. It's very much it got the same mood as the song from Going Down the Road. I think.
But it's not on the album though, right?
No,
It's not.
it
It's
doesn't
okay.
appear on anything. I mean,
Yeah.
that's possibly, no, it wouldn't be the only, but it's one of the few songs in that Clipography where it doesn't exist on vinyl. And that way, I used to joke about it. It would be my dream to find a vinyl copy of that, but no.
How just out of curiosity then, did you ever have an opportunity prior to, say, YouTube to listen to the song if you weren't watching the
No,
movie?
I was able to lift.
Wow.
I finally figured out, I was able to tape the clip, and I had Audacity, and I did lift an MP3 off that. So I have it on
Right.
MP3.
Yeah.
No,
Well, now
before,
it's easier to do in the internet world, but prior
yeah,
to that, you would have had to see the movie to hear the
had to
song,
watch the
right?
movie to hear
Wow.
that song. Yeah. So, when I came to love the song, I probably only heard it 3 or 4 or 5 or however many times I'd seen the movie. That's how many times I heard the song.
That's remarkable. And the
Yeah.
movie was well known, so it's amazing that they just didn't find a way to release it or something. Wow.
Yeah, you'd think they might have tacked it onto his record, like they
Like a
didn't have
greatest
enough.
hits or something, or I don't know.
Something. Yeah. I wonder, I don't know
Maybe
if
it
there's
is,
ever been a
but
Bruce Cockburn box set. I could see maybe it would turn up on that. But, they certainly didn't have enough music in the film for a soundtrack. And it was so low budget. It wasn't the kind of soundtrack they were going to release anyway. But that's a good question. I wonder if Bruce Cockburn people have suggested to him, can't you get this onto some project that you do?
So when I did rewatch it, I thought the use of the song was great. It's the opening sequence. Would you say there's a little bit of could it be considered a little bit of a precursor to Leonard Cohen and McCabe and Mrs. Miller, even maybe?
Yeah, I think it very much has that same mood. I just saw the film I saw 2 nights ago, the Kelly Reichardt First Cow pays explicit tribute to McCabe and Mrs. Miller and uses one of the actors, Rene Auberjois, or however you pronounce his name, and it's got the same mood as McCabe. But that comes a year before. It was a film that did get a lot of notice at the time, both it and my uncle Antoine, the French film. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Altman had seen it and was after something of the same mood. It's got those great desolate shots of small town Nova Scotia. Yeah, it's the opening credits, and basically, we see these 2 guys, Joey and Petey. They're packing up to leave for Toronto, but they're getting their stuff is intercut with just shots of local fishermen and local people. And it really sets the tone for the film. They're leaving behind one world and leaving for another that they're just so totally ill prepared to enter. They've got a version of Toronto that just the reality of it doesn't match their version of it at all. And and the song mentions basically I'm a fisherman like my father and my father before him, which is, you get the feeling that's the life they were meant to lead. But You know, you got two guys, and it's Pete that's the aspirational guy who's always
Mhm.
who wants to get out of there and wants to do better.
The
Joey,
blonde one,
the
right?
blonde guy,
Yeah.
yeah. Joey just will go along with whatever because he's friends with Petey.
Mhm.
And you know, I was thinking about it tonight. They're basically uh, they're going to Toronto in 1970, but they're leaving behind a world that probably is 1955 or so. Now, I
Yeah.
was thinking, you know, I don't know, it was Don Shebib. There must have been some hippies in Nova Scotia at the time, but I have to believe that, you know, they weren't, it wasn't quite in sync with the rest of the world, probably.
I remember the fishermen returning so gay, their nets with the silver cod blessed, but they couldn't compete with the company fleets. Now it's welfare, relief, or go west. So I'm going down the road, boys, seeking what I'm owed, boys, and I know it must get better if far enough I go.
And they're leaving that behind. And this great Bruce Cockburn song plays and just captures it. It's about a couple minutes, plays in its entirety, parodied brilliantly by SCTV. They used a song that was similar to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that's the song I picked because, you know, we've talked about I had this kind of loose rule that anything I picked was going to be either pop music or you could make a case that it was related to pop music. Otherwise, as you know, the other great scene, I probably would have gone with the scene in A&A Records. And for years, I thought it was Sam the Record Man. It's not. It's A&A Records, where they use this Satie's famous piece, Three Gymnasts or 12
Right.
Gymnopédies.
Yeah.
And that scene is just stunning. You know, whatever you think of the film, I don't know how anybody could come away from that scene not remembering
Mhm.
this 25-year-old woman who was in the scene. Do you mind if I describe that? I'll do it quickly.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a key
They're
scene. Yeah.
downtown for their big drinking night. They've hit the city. They've got their first paycheck. And this is the thing SCTV parodies. Every time they have money, it's like, let's go to Yonge Street, John Candy. So they all pile in a car and go to Yonge Street. It's Yonge Street 1970. The Yonge Street I never saw. We talked about Ron Mann and him. He's shooting basically the end of that era, the colonial tavern era.
Right.
And they wander into A&A Records specifically to steal some records. And they head for the country section, but Pete wanders upstairs to the classical section. I guess A&A's, just like Sam's, their classical section was not on the main floor, it was on the second floor. And the mood just totally changes. Like it's loud rock music when they enter the store.
Yeah.
Everything goes quiet and the Satie music's playing and he spots this just unbelievably beautiful woman. She's just like this vision, this angelic vision.
Yeah.
And, you know, immediately he wants to pick her up and he's just so off the mark. And she's playing, you know, you could go in, you could take a record right out of the sleeve. I don't think they were cellophane wrapped, and you could put it on. She's listening to the Satie, and he walks over with kind of a lecherous smirk on his face and says something. Oh, so you come here often? Or I kind of like that stuff, eh? Completely inane chatter. And she looks up and she just smiles at him, and she says, you know, sometimes. And then he takes that as a signal that, oh, she's receptive to my advances, and he moves a little closer to her. And then she smiles again. She says, well, I guess I'd better go. She just walks away. And you get this beautiful shot of her walking away, and he feels like an idiot, and he ends up knocking the tone arm.
Yeah. That's great.
And this really snooty record clerk comes over, and it's you know, it's one of those things that is of its moment. I think he's supposed to be gay, and there's a little bit of a caricature there. And he says, oh, I like that. You go, and the guy says, it's Satie, beautiful, isn't it? and he ends up buying it.
Hey, you kind of like that stuff, huh? You come here a lot? I was just wondering. So I come here a lot, too. Of course, I don't know anything about classical music, but I like it, though, you know?
Well, I better go now. Bye.
The great part of it is, for me, not great part, sad part of it, but interesting part is that when I did see a screening of Going Down the Road at the Lightbox, but then the Cinematheque, Don Shebib introduced it, and I was getting nervous asking questions in those settings, but
Sorry, what year was that? When was that, Phil, that you saw it?
probably right towards the end of the Cinematheque's run, before the Lightbox. So I think Lightbox started about 2010 or something.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
around that time, and I raised my hand and I said, I'm sure many of us that love the film can't forget this one woman. And I knew her name was Sheila White. Whatever happened to her? She died within a year or two of that film being made.
Oh, wow.
She had, even I think while they were making the film, she had some kind of terminal disease, like leukemia or something, and she died 26 or 27.
Jeez.
And I was just flabbergasted to hear that, because that scene just stayed in my mind forever.
Yeah.
The scene I could never forget.
I had completely forgotten that Kale reviewed the movie and
Yeah.
sort of raved about it for the most part. And she does mention in her review that it has a very much I don't know if she even says documentary feel. I think she might even say he uses documentary techniques or something, but she does point that out, that it's got a very naturalistic feel. And I think she might compare it favorably to like more favorably than John Cassavetes' work or something. I think she says something about Cassavetes' work in comparison. Like, this is actually better than, these much lauded films by John Cassavetes. It's working sort of within the same territory or whatever.
That wouldn't surprise me at all, because I'm thinking Cassavetes' Husbands came out in 1970, and there's scenes of these guys getting drunk in bars. There's a long scene where they get drunk, and you compare that to the scenes of Joey and Petey getting drunk in bars. Going Down the Road to me is much far superior.
Yeah.
She did give it a good. She said it had, I think if I remember the review, she said it had some limitations of the kind of film it was. But I think she's also had something like, it puts most films to shame. It's just so genuine. And
and she pointed out, and this actually reminded me of a Robert Christgau line. She points out that the film, for some reason, she felt the need to point out that the film only cost, I think she said $82,000 to make. And if the Christgau thing it reminds me of is he has the line in his review of the first Ramones album, it only cost him $6,400 to make, or something like that. But I mean, her point is that, you can do something interesting with the right spirit and the right actors. But yeah, I think for the most part, her review is very, very positive. It's in deeper into movies.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think she does say it kind of loses something. Like, it ultimately is I think she says something like it's ultimately kind of a hollow story or a narrow story, but within those confines, it's extremely well done, is sort of what I gathered from her review.
I'm sure that was a godsend for Don Shebib in trying to get the film marketed and into theaters. I would
have wondered how it did. I assume it did well in Canada.
I think it was a big deal and probably made back its money just from the notice and the Star, things like Star and Globe would rave about it. And probably got a pretty good opening in Toronto, I'm thinking. Montreal.
Like, is it considered? Is it sort of considered the sort of one of the early classic Canadian films? Like
It's basically, I think, the first film that is considered kind of the beginning of this line of films that happened for the next 10 years would be Don Owen's Nobody Waved Goodbye. And then there was one in 65, blanking out on the title. And then Going Down the Road comes along. And then the next one, and I finally saw it within the last 5 years. It is really good. I don't like it as much as Going Down the Road, but the Montreal film, my Uncle Antoine.
right. Okay.
Which Kale also, I think both Kale and Saris love that one. I think that one is generally considered the greatest Canadian film.
Right.
It usually tops Going Down the Road. And there may be a film or two since then, like Adam Goin's A Sweet Hereafter. And there was the Inuit film too, The Fast Runner, which was very acclaimed.
Right.
But Going Down the Road is still definitely in the top. It's always top 10. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And there's Cronenberg stuff in there. Yeah, not quite the beginning, but I think when it came out, it was the biggest Canadian film, or it attracted certainly more international attention than anything ever.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll just very quickly, I won't keep it to 2 minutes. My story, sort of like your Matt Saracen story, is running into the Petey in a bar.
Oh, wow.
My first or second year university, and it was sad. We used to go upstairs at the Young Station. I think it was above a strip club, but we used to go upstairs, and this was a 35-cent draft down on your luck bar.
So this would have been about 10 years after. This would have been about 79,
10
80.
years
Is that
after
when you were
this
in?
is,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
exactly then. And there was Petey. I couldn't believe it. So I went over. We did talk, and he was his character. There was no
Really?
line between. He was drunk. He was, and he's dead now. So I don't want to come out bad, but he was kind of clinging to projects that you sat there and you said, this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
He had a script for some film called, and this is what confused me, because I thought the film in 65 was called Winter Kept Us Warm, and yet I thought his script, my recollection is that he had a script for a film called Winter Kept Us Warm. And I thought, well, that's a great title. But I also thought, thinking about you here, this is not going to happen. And he said he'd just come from Don Shebib's house, or he was going over to see Don Shebib. And whereas Petey did go on to have a pretty successful career as a character actor. He'll turn up in Clint Eastwood films. You'll see him in certain films through the 70s. Joey just never went anywhere, and he ended up dying fairly young. And I remember the screening I saw with Don Shebib, there was a couple of cast members there, and they mentioned him fondly, just what a great guy he was. But it was kind of sad.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, my favorite Canadian film ever, and one of my favorite films ever, and certainly of the 70s. Key early 70s film. I think it gets that early 70s mood, as well as McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Some of the Altmans. I think it's got that style down for sure.